Hello, everybody. So, today I wanted to make a short video where I discuss dietary variety in herp species, particularly the Insectivores kinds, and some of the reasons why dietary variety is important. So, let's jump right into it. First question you might be asking is, what is dietary variety? And that is simply an animal having access to a wide range of food items. In the context of insectivores, that's a wide range of insect and other small arthropod species for it to prey upon. Um, and we're going to get into what some of those options might be for different sized animals later. But one of the things that you have to realize is that a lot of these insectivores are generalist predators. So when I say generalist, what I mean is the animal will eat whatever comes near it that's a suitable food item. So a generalist insectivore will eat basically any insect that it can catch, kill, and swallow. If it's something that swallows its prey whole versus, like a mantis where it grabs the prey and holds onto it, eats it. Generalist predators are not picky. Now, you should not feed them like specialists, and what I mean by that is you should not offer them a single species diet. Not only are multiple species diets scientifically shown to improve health outcomes for many insectivore species, they just make a lot of sense ecologically speaking because, these are organisms that aren't going to encounter the same prey species throughout their lifespan. Um, so there are a couple of good arguments for giving a varied diet to your critter. The first is that the animal is going to have enrichment. It's going to be stimulated intellectually or at least mentally by having a wide range of different species, different sights, smells, sounds, tastes, things like that. And that's going to be healthy for the animal. There are some studies on. Why is this? Sorry. On mammals, even simpler mammals like rodents, where the same scenery, the same food item, things like that, get boring and stressful. And any source of stress is really bad for any captive animal. You already have enough stress being in captivity from things like confined space and, the noises of humans and other things, and just all sorts of other things that are stressful. And this might be why certain species are difficult to take care of in captivity because they're more sensitive to some of the things. We tend to think of being inside a house or a building as nice and safe, but something that's adapted to deal with, you know, changes in the environment as well as day and night temperature shifts, UV light, things like that, that we deprive them of indoors, we can cause some problems. Now, another reason to use a varied diet is to make sure your organism gets the full repertoire of nutrients that it needs from its diet. Not only are certain species going to have more of a certain nutrient than other species, and you want to fill in nutrient gaps by offering a varied diet, you also have the ease of digestibility differing between different species of prey insects. And so you definitely want to offer different species for that reason. And another good reason that kind of goes along with this is transient gut microbes. Now let's talk about what transient gut microbes are. Gut microbes are microorganisms that assist in the absorption of nutrients and other materials from food. They are essential in an animal's ability to um, get everything it needs from its diet. Okay? They are symbionts. They help with not only stimulating the immune system and preventing infections from bad microbes, if you will, they help make certain nutrients, especially vitamins, bioavailable to the animal. Transient gut microbes are gut microbes that don't stick around. They are in or on the prey item, they are swallowed by the animal, they do their job inside the animal's body, but then they're expelled in the feces. different prey items have different flora, which will give different gut flora, transient gut microbiomes to these animals. And there are studies on how this is beneficial to frogs, snakes, lizards, things like that. Um, they are very much a part of that organism's ability to thrive. And a varied diet is a surefire way of going ahead and giving that organism its full repertoire of nutrients. Now, let's talk a little bit about different prey options for these animals. So you have small prey such as fruit flies, springtails, very tiny roach species such as Compsognathus schwarzii are available now, as well as dwarf isopods. These are some of the smallest prey items you can get for insectivores and things like that. You don't just want to use fruit flies. You don't just want to use vinegar eels. You don't just want to use black worms, blah, blah, blah. You want to use a combination of everything. You can also use the very, very young larvae of silkworms, black soldier flies, house flies, things like that. When I was breeding axolotls, I would make fruit fly medium from a culture really, really wet, and then use a needle to fish out the fruit fly larvae as they started to climb up the cups. And I used that as a food source for the very young axolotls. And these various organisms, these various species are going to be helpful. As the animals get bigger, very small crickets, small young roaches, the young larvae of waxworms, silkworms, hornworms even, things like that are going to be helpful. You kind of have to be a little crafty. I have a whole bunch of waxworm colonies going, and I'll use the very young larvae for the firebelly toads. And I know people are like, oh, waxworms are just fatty, blah, blah, blah. One, when they're very young in their earlier instars, they're not. Because waxworms don't really store fat. They store a lot of fat in the last instar because the adults don't feed. But in the earlier instars, they're not doing that just yet. So they're not that fatty when they're young. Young waxworms are not that fatty. It's only the mature waxworms, it's only the mature black soldier fly larvae, things like that, that are really fatty. And fat's not bad to eat. It's not as good as protein, but it still provides calories, okay? And that's one of the things these animals need. The other thing is that the waxworm larvae are feeding on a high protein diet, and so they're still passing some protein on. And it's not like it's the only thing I'm feeding to the firebelly toad larvae. Other good small prey items would be mini mealworms, the hatchlings of mealworms. A lot of species that you can rear, you can use the smaller larvae, the earlier instars. What we used to do with silkworms, actually, is we used to have tens of thousands of them in the fridge, and we would keep them in the fridge, and every week we would pull out a couple hundred. So we would always have silkworms of every size available. Silkworms can be a little bit of a hassle to work with, unfortunately. But that's just a thought. As insectivores get larger, larger isopods, larger black soldier fly larvae, larger mealworms, superworms, waxworms, crickets. I keep about a dozen species of roaches solely for food, for animals. I have a couple other roach species. Let's see, I've got lobster roaches, I've got orange heads, red heads, I've got cave roaches that I will use as feeders, gold medal roaches when their populations get high enough, pallid roaches, hooded roaches or Compsognathus schwarzii, and then I've got the green banana roaches. I've got a lot of roaches that are feeder species. Paraplecta minutissima and Pycnoscalesternamensis are right next to me. The Paraplecta are like this big as adults, so that's a very small roach species that's useful. And so there are benefits to offering a varied diet. And the orange heads get like this big, and the cave roaches are even bigger. So those are prey items for the larger tarantulas. The larger tarantulas will also occasionally get live fuzzies or something like that. And you know, I think in some ways the offering dietary variety is easiest when things are a little bit smaller. Not tiny, tiny, but once a tarantula gets to a certain size, it's hard to give it a varied diet. Um, because I tried to raise Mormon crickets and that wasn't fun. But I just wanted to put that out there that a varied diet is very important, and I think that there are ways. I breed about half of my feeder species, and then I buy large quantities of the other half. I tried breeding superworms; it didn't work very well. I can start a mealworm colony at some point. I might have to do that. Fly breeding is a little harder here in Colorado than it was when I lived in Rhode Island because it's just so dry. The eggs are very hard to get to hatch. Um, but I hope this was helpful, and if anybody has questions, just feel free to ask in the comments.